So, hi everyone, and welcome officially to episode 10 of Aringo MBA Admission Consulting Coffee Chat.
Mhm.
I'm Shimri Winters. I head the strategy here at Aringo. And today we're talking about a topic that really causes, I would say, anxiety and worry in the MBA admissions world for candidates that are thinking of the MBA or already started working on the GMAT, which the topic is low GMAT or low GPA. And today, I'm super excited because if you've seen some of our previous coffee chats, usually Priyanka and Jennifer host them, but today they've left me in charge and I can do whatever I want. And I just had the strategy, so we can just talk strategy today. And because I'm in charge, I decided to bring one of the most experienced senior MBA admission consultants on the planet, probably with, the most experience that I can think of, 16 or 17 years full time, Danielle Marom. Hello.
Everyone. Hi,
Yay.
everyone.
I'm excited.
Mhm.
So, Danielle, I'm just going to jump right into it. Okay. I mean, you have nearly 20 years of experience working with hundreds of MBA applicants. So when an MBA applicant comes to you with a, lower than average GMAT or GPA, we will talk about numbers shortly. Don't worry. What does that mean? But, first thing he comes with some kind of issue. What's the first thing you tell them?
Right. Well, first of all, hi, everyone, and thanks for hosting me, Shimri. Okay, so when I meet an applicant for the first time, they tell me about a low GMAT or GPA. I tell them to take a breath. At Aringo, our specialty and our slogan is low GPA or GMAT, get admitted. We don't see a low GPA or low GMAT as a no. We basically see this as a challenge, and this challenge requires a very specific set of tactical moves.
Okay, I love it. And I think we're going to talk about these tactical moves. So I like that. So again, I think we're going to talk about the process and what we do to help our candidates move from kind of a weak candidate on paper to getting an admissions at the end, which is, that's the main thing. So before we dive into this, please, everyone on the chat, please keep typing your questions. Danielle and I, in about 20 minutes or 15 minutes, when we finish a few questions between us, we will be looking at the chat and answering real live questions. So please just type them in the chat. I promise to be looking there in a couple of minutes. It's always nice to know where you're from. If you don't mind just telling us that in the question before. So, Danielle, let's define the problem. What would you consider as a low GPA or low GMAT today? Um, in the old GMAT, it was a bit easier. We had this 700 mark. I used to tell candidates, always aim for above 700. That's changed a bit with the GMAT Focus Edition. And it's not always clear, what is considered low for an M7 school, and maybe what's high for, top 25 MBA program.
Right. So let's start by saying that it's all relative to the school's range. But generally, if we're talking about a GPA, anything below a 3.2 GPA is where the outcomes start to look for academic red flags. And if you're below a 3.0, you're in what we would call the high strategy zone, which means we need to address this. And for the GMAT or the GRE, it's basically the same thing. For the GMAT, if you're 30 to 40 points below the school's average, you need a solid mitigation plan. Same with the GRE, 3 to 5 points below the average. So, to put some numbers there, if we look at the top programs like Harvard or Stanford or Wharton, their GMAT Focus Edition average is around 675, 685. So, anything below 645, which is kind of the new 700 mark, will be considered low.
Okay, that makes sense. And what I liked in your way, you didn't give me a number. You said kind of 30 to 40 points below the school that you're looking at is a problem, or you need to address it. And that's interesting because a lot of candidates think they have a low GMAT, but then when we compare it to the school averages, they're actually not so far from the range. So that's actually good to take into account. If you're within the range of 30 or 40 points of the average score, you're okay. This might not be a huge issue like you think. If your GPA is only 3.3 or 3.4, that might be okay. But Danielle is saying if it's lower than those points, you probably need to address this. Danielle, is this kind of a cut, one fits all, or do demographics take part here?
I would say for sure demographics take part.
Oh, this is
If you're
great.
from
You
an
would say that.
overrepresented pool, for example, a male Indian engineer, even a score which is close to the school's average might be considered low relative to your peers. On the other hand, if you have, let's say, an exotic or an unconventional, non-traditional background, schools might decide to overlook that low score.
I understand. I understand. And that does make sense. And again, we do see a lot of white male Wall Street finance guys, people. We see Indian engineers and big four accountants, even McKinsey consultants. It sounds very sexy, but there's a lot of them. So sometimes when you do come from that kind of pool, you need to show how different you are. That is so true. Okay, and of course, we'll definitely go into how you mitigate this with a lower score. But just before, I did want to mention that there's a very simple way to mitigate a low GPA or even a low GMAT. And ADCOMS might add a few points if you kind of do a course which will give you extra credit. Now, this isn't an academic course, it's not part of your undergraduate degree, but there are some courses like HBS Core. That's kind of an online course. It doesn't cost that much, a couple $1,000. I mean, it's not like an MBA. And it has a few of the business themes, accounting and analytics, economics. And again, if you kind of pass that, that kind of shows that you do have this academic rigor, that you can, you're good enough for an MBA, even if your GMAT or GPA was a bit low. Another one I've seen a lot of people use is UC Berkeley Extension. Again, it's like their online executive education courses. And they have lots of courses. One of them is Math for Management, Intro to Statistics. If you do these things, this kind of shows business school that you're ready for their academics, their tough and rigorous academics. And the third one is MBA Math. Again, very self-paced, you do it online. And it's recommended, again, not for everyone, definitely not needed for everyone. But if, for example, your quant score in the GMAT was low, this can kind of prove to the schools you're ready. So that's just wanted to mention kind of those courses. Danielle, have you seen people
Yeah.
use these?
I would also say that it's really great that you mentioned these. I want to emphasize to our viewers that these aren't just certificates. They are what are considered alternative transcripts. In
I like
schools
that.
that value academics, this could be Cornell, Columbia, or Duke, they will really appreciate this extra mile. So it's definitely worth investing in, and it could really pay dividends.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just reminding everyone, we'll do another one or two questions, me and Danielle, but then we're going to answer some chat questions. So please keep writing questions in the chat. We'll definitely address them in a couple of minutes. Me and Danielle talk very quickly. So, this is going very fast. Danielle, we're going to do more sessions. I love having you here. I love it. Okay. Let's talk about the actual application. Okay. So how do you, as a consultant, help a candidate overshadow this, not so great GMAT in the essays, maybe in the resume?
Yes. So this is the part I love about working with Aringo. It's about narrative dominance. If your stats are low, your professional impact has to be twice as loud. And that's what we help craft with the applications. The resume, for example, we want to move away from descriptions, job descriptions, and responsibilities to what we call high impact leadership and accomplishments. I push my applicants to really find what I like to call the hero moments, or those that can really highlight high impact. So instead of saying, for example, I analyze data, we would encourage applicants to say, led the strategic initiative that saved $2 million. So the nuances are really important there. And in the essays, we basically take a similar approach. We build a story of executive potential. So we want the AdCom to think this is a person with he's such a clear future leader that we'd be crazy to reject them over a test score. That at the end of the day, the test score is not what's going to determine whether a person has the potential to be a great future leader.
Okay. So everybody thinking about, an M7 school and just think, they'll be crazy not to take you. Forget this little GMAT bump. Okay. We just want to write an amazing application, like Danielle says, that overcomes it. Really good advice, Danielle. Really good. One question that I get a lot is, what about the optional essay? You know, I see, I get a lot of applications, which kind of retrospectively, people send me the applications after they got dinged or didn't get in. And I think a lot of applicants are just using this space wrong. And, you know, sometimes, you know, how would you handle this? You're the expert.
So this is such an important question. And I'd say to keep it clinical, don't make excuses. If you have an opportunity to reveal something new about yourself with the optional essay, that is one approach. Another approach is to address a low GPA or a low GMAT, but again, stay away from making excuses. If you decide to discuss a low score, and again, because we don't always have to mention if it's 20 points below GMAT average or a 3.2 GPA, it has to really have validity and verify, like to be worth an entire new essay. So if you're going to do this, I'd say to acknowledge the score, mention the reason, if it's workload, if it's health, etc., but immediately point to the HBS core or the other professional promotions or whatever you've done that shows that you have academic rigor. Show them essentially that the 20-year-old student that you were and the 26-year-old professional are two different people and that you've taken specific actions to address any concerns that they might have had and to build your skill sets in a calculated and informed way in the future.
I love it. I think you said a few key things. Like, first of all, if you don't always have to address a bit lower than average GMAT or GPA. First of all, the word if was so important. And then if you do decide to address it, you know, acknowledge the issue kind of thing. And we have a lot of students who in the first year of university, it's a bit of a shock. They didn't, you know, they couldn't decide what, maybe they partied a bit too much, or maybe they just were in shock. Maybe they moved to a new city, maybe they moved to a new country. So their GPA was a bit lower. And if, you know, you showed that in year 3 or in year 4, you improved, or maybe you did do, you know, like you said, HBS core or a different course or high GMAT but low GPA, all these things can overcome a low GMAT or GPA. So this is a very specific essay. And one other thing that you said, Danielle, don't repeat stuff. Don't just use the optional essay because it's there. Use it if you have something to, you know, to tell the schools. So very important. Okay, those are all my questions. That's it. We can wrap it up, but minor detail. Let's answer some questions of some other people. So again, you know, feel free to write questions on the chat. And here I'm starting to look at the questions on the chat. I just wanted to mention that if you would like a free chances estimation and profile assessment, you have here my email. You have here a barcode that you can scan, QR code that you can scan. You have my calendar. You have everything. I would like to mention I love CVs. I don't just like a random email. Hi, what are my chances? I need to know you. I need a CV. I need a GMAT score or GMAT plans, school wish list, and then I can go into it. But again, you have our details. And again, I can see there's a lot of people and a lot of questions. I'm going to dive now into some of the questions, or Danielle is going to dive. I'll just read you some questions. Danielle, how are you?
Doing
Are you
great.
ready?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
Okay. So we have some specific cases, but I think people can kind of take the specifics and kind of, you know, think about their own profile. So here's one. Okay. I'm aiming for Columbia and NYU. Okay. Two great schools. They love high GMATs. I'm already telling you that. And I have a 635 GMAT Focus Edition. Let's add 50 points. That means they have around 685 in the all GMAT. Keep in mind, this is around 50 points below Columbia and NYU's average, 40 to 50 points below, but 8 years of high-level management experience. Should I take the HBS core or, you know, one of these other courses?
Okay. With 8 years of experience, I'd say that your professional weight is high. However, with a 635, which is around, I think, 40 points, we said, below Columbia and NYU's averages, I'd still suggest a course like MBA Math at a minimum. It's a low cost insurance policy for your application. And like I said earlier, I think it's worth the investment and it can really pay dividends. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, I mean, I totally agree. Um, as head of strategy, and I help a lot of people also pick schools, I would say that perhaps we should think also about schools that value experienced leaders over test scores. Again, specifically, you pick two schools that kind of like high GMATs. So it would be a challenge for anyone, whatever your profile is, to get into these two schools with a 635 GMAT. We kind of said maybe 645 would be kind of the 30-point mark. But again, we've seen it before. By the way, we just had yesterday a 585 GMAT that got into NCAD. 585 is probably 630 to 640 in the old GMAT. So this is roughly 70 to 80 points below average. So forget what we said. She didn't take MBA math. She just wrote with our support a very good application. So it's all possible, but again, case by case, and we need to kind of decide, okay, what to do for each profile. Okay, so I'm actually in the chat, scrolling down, and I'm saying hello to people who said hello, so thank you for that. And thanks for everybody who joined. There's some people joined less, etc. Okay, so first question, actually, it's a tough question. So, is there a preference for M7 or top 20 schools between MBA core and MBA math? Do you want me to get it, Danielle?
Yeah, I think that maybe I'd like to
My
hear what
my
you have
kind of
to
question?
bring
Okay.
in.
First of all, we spoke a lot about MBA Core or MBA Math or Berkeley or UCLA have a online course as well. Again, this is completely optional. This is unconventional. I've no idea what the percentage of top MBA candidates that take these courses, but very, very, very low. Okay, so I don't want anyone to think that they have to take one of these courses. Okay, this is optional, but as Danielle explained before, you can kind of use this as an alternative transcript. Okay, so if you want to prove something, it's a good idea, but definitely not a must. No, there's no difference between HBS Core in my eyes and MBA Math. Most adcoms from top schools will know these kinds of courses. So kind of whatever you prefer, they teach different things, so maybe whatever interests you more. Some take more time, some take less time. So, you'll have to decide if you need this course at all. Also, that's the first decision. Okay, next question from Henry. Thank you for joining, Henry. I've scored 645 in my first attempt. Okay, that's quite a good score. And 625 in my second attempt. Should I go for another attempt or work with this score? And then his brief kind of profile, 6 years of work experience as a software engineer, GPA 3.6. Still missing a million things about your profile, Henry. I'll just give some examples: international experience, managerial experience, volunteering. What did you study? Where did you study? Who are you? Where do you come from? What country? And what's the theme of the application? What industry do you work in? So I just want to say that again, every case here is kind of case by case, but it's what you bring to the table that kind of matters. And yes. Anyway,
Right.
Danielle, if someone has a
I will
six
also
foot,
add,
yeah,
yeah, so I'll also add to what Shimmy started saying, some of the things that I'd be interested in understanding with the 6 years of work experience, if you've had promotions within those 6 years, what
right.
the context, often candidates will say, my GPA is 3.6. And I'm wondering, well, is everyone's GPA 3.6? Or can you give me some context? Was that in the top 5% of your graduating cohort? So as Shimri said, there's so many different elements that will help us create a really, really strong profile. I would say that, like Shimri said, this first score is strong. And you did less well in the second one. Now, there's a lot of reasons that could happen. The question is, do you feel confident going into a third one? How much time would you have to invest in this? The process of writing the applications and the essays and the CV is time consuming, but that also pays dividends. So you'd have to balance how much time you have to invest in another GMAT score. I would say if you have the time, You scored well the first time, perhaps you have the potential to score well the second time, but I wouldn't let it come at the expense of the time that you're going to invest in crafting your application.
I totally agree. And actually, we answered a very lengthy answer, which the answer should have been yes. If you can
You're right.
improve the score, if you can
Hmm.
improve the score 20 points more, okay? So if you invest half a year and improve 10 points, you've done nothing. But if you can improve the score by 20 points, that's my 2 cents. And now Danielle is saying, and without harming the time that you need to invest in an application, which I'm saying is around 3 months before the round. Working with us can take 3 months to work on 5 or 6 applications. So, of course, do another GMAT. There's no minimum or maximum of number of GMATs. The schools don't care how many GMATs you've taken. So, if you can improve it, great. If you can't, start working on the application. Okay, next question. If someone is from the representative background, okay, we've met some of those. For example, specifically an Indian male engineer. I think Aringa, we work with, I think a third of our candidates are Indian male engineers. Okay, so we work with many tens of Indian male engineers every year. Do they look at the engineering as a whole, or which major it was? Okay, so as there are really so many, in computer science and IT guys, but less core engineers. Okay, so I think he was kind of saying kind of civil engineering, or I today was speaking to someone who did, I don't know how you call it, but satellite engineering or something like that. So does it benefit if you come kind of from another engineering discipline, or not? Danielle,
Well,
to you.
I think if you're able to add a different perspective of the engineering, I think that there is benefit to that. If you're able to share with the AdCom what the benefits were or the value of you going into a specific field, if it was civil or metallurgy, like I think that that element is important. It can help distinguish you from others. You could even potentially talk about specific projects that you worked on or research. It also is important about how it comes into your career goals. So if you're able to build a career strategy and a career path that is related to a specific engineering path, as opposed to something more general and generic, then I think it can work to your advantage.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, if you did biotechnology engineering, if that's an engineering degree, or satellite engineering, and now you work in a biotechnology firm or in a satellite firm. So obviously your experience, forget the degree, is so much different than someone who's a software engineer and writes code all day. So, anything that's unique in your case is an advantage. So don't think about what you have the same like other people. Think what you have different. Maybe you work for a very interesting company. Maybe you work in a very interesting geography. Maybe your client is super interesting. I had once a programmer, nothing, computer science in a very regular university, not IIT and not Ivy League and not nothing, just a regular university. And he was just a C++ programmer, but his client, and he was like outsourcing services, but his client was a clean green energy from Waves, sea waves energy company. Okay, there aren't many of these energy company from sea waves. I was like, wow, and he was like, no, I just write code. And I was like, no, it's so much. So anything different that you can bring to the table is amazing. Okay, so
Yeah. I
definitely
think
if you've studied,
I'll just
yeah.
follow up on that for 1 second. The idea is that candidates often just take things for granted. As Shimri was saying, it's like, oh, I have an engineering background, and oh, I come from a traditional background. Anything, this process takes a lot of self-reflection. And if you're able to identify how you're able to distinguish your candidacy from others and not take things for granted, that's where all the gems come out. And that's also how we're often able to help candidates pull that information out because sometimes they just don't know, what they're taking for granted or not.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when people come and work with us, the first thing we do is interview them. And we ask like everything. What do your parents do? Where did you grow up? What are your hobbies? What does your partner do? And then they said, why do you care? I'll tell you about my achievement. And we said, we need to know the big picture. Sometimes the stories are hiding there and you're just not thinking about them. They might be from your volunteering. They might be from your childhood. They might be from your parents. They might be because you have a special manager who gave you, the big picture on projects and took you to managerial meetings, and you took that for granted, but that's a big deal. Just tell us everything. We'll help. Okay. Actually, I like the next question because, again, I want to emphasize, I'm already starting with the answer. You don't have to take those 3, 4 courses that we mentioned. That is one way. Danielle mentioned a whole other way, which is using the essays, the CV, the optional essays. Okay, there's other ways to overcome a low GPA, but I'll just read the question from Supriya. Thank you for the question. I'm an Indian professional with 8 years of experience. Curious to know whether it still makes strategic sense to pursue certifications like we discussed, HBS Core or UC Berkeley, given a low undergraduate GPA and a degree from a second-tier college. Okay, so this happens a lot. Not everybody studies in India in IITs or in the US at Harvard or at Oxford or Cambridge. That's fine. Despite having, again, remember, 8 years of experience, having a 700 plus GMAT score and experience working with FANG, which is the, technology companies, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, whatever, Google and whatever, companies and other global tech giants and targeting HBS, and MIT and Stanford and Yale. So would you suggest that she takes one of these core extension courses?
I think here it goes back to what you were saying about trying to do that data mining and understanding, for example, why there was a low undergraduate GPA. Perhaps that would be something that we'd want to address. Were you struggling at the beginning? Did you move to a new country? I think that it could add value to take one of the certifications, and ideally that you do well, and then it helps to show that 700 GMAT is because of the core knowledge that you have, not because you necessarily luckily tested well on a certain day. And that's able, or if you're able to explain why you had the lower undergraduate score. I think that there's, again, there's so many different elements. And the key is really, it's like putting the pieces of a puzzle together, like understanding what the strategy is and to be able to understand what the red flags might be and to address them accordingly. Again, not to make excuses. But if there was, a reason, like I said, that you had the low GPA, why is that reason and versus why X amount of years later you were able to score so highly on the GMAT? We want things to be very transparent. We want the applicants to show a lot of self-awareness and a lot of growth. So the more that we can provide the content and the context for your professional and personal growth, the more your story makes sense to the AdCom and the more that they're going to be invested in your story and in your potential as a future leader.
So I agree and disagree and agree and disagree twice. And I'll explain why. First of all, Supriya, send me your CV, send me your exact GMAT score, and I'll give you a bit of a better chances assessment and maybe the next step. What I loved about what Danielle said was the puzzle pieces. And I want you to take into account that there's these puzzle pieces, which are different for every candidate. And actually, you can reach, in theory, 150 points out of the 100 points that each of these schools are looking at you. That means, what happens if you have a master's degree? Does this count? Obviously. What happens if you have some kind of volunteering that other people don't? Does this count? Yes. What happens if you were promoted faster than others? Does this count? There's a lot of these extra points and it's not bonus points, but it's just differentiators that you will have for your profile. Now, I think Danielle was a bit ignoring your GMAT. If your GMAT is 700 plus in Focus Edition, which means above average, okay, because the school averages, even M7 schools will be 685 in Focus Edition. So she wasn't ignoring that. We need to understand what the GMAT was. But if it was above average, then this already kind of overcomes a low GPA. And again, your GPA was 8 years ago, but maybe you took the GMAT last year. Now, the GMAT is also an alternative transcript to your undergraduate, right? The GMAT is an educational course that you took and an exam at the end a very difficult exam. So in your specific case, I'm not actually sure you need this extra course. So I think, like Danielle, we don't know enough. There's a lot of puzzle pieces, but if you do have, some of the other ones, you don't need this additional one that we discuss, it probably won't add much. But if the GMAT is a bit below average and the GPA is a bit below average, and maybe you weren't promoted so fast in your, maybe there's a lot of issues, then this can kind of help. So again, if there aren't many issues in your profile, you don't need this. This is kind of bonus points. So it's only, it's very specific. That was my answer. That's why I was thinking, do I agree? Do I not agree? Both. Okay, I'm trying to get to 2 or 3 more questions before we wrap it up. Okay, rather than talking about the overall GMAT score, which percentiles per section are among M7 averages? And which percentiles, oh, come on, okay, are considered low? So actually, I won't talk about that, and I'll explain. Yes, the GMAT has changed last year, and I'll give you a little secret. Not all the schools understand exactly the new GMAT, and they don't really care that much. They're looking at the total score. Now, again, if you have 100% in data analytics and only 50% in the math section, that's not very even. But if you do have some kind of GMAT which is kind of even, just look at the total score. Otherwise, you won't get out of it, kind of thing. It's going to be too much. Just look at the total score of your GMAT and then at the maybe average score of the school. This actually reminded me one thing from one of the questions before. The first question we read was someone who had a 645 GMAT in the first attempt and 625 in the second attempt. What I wanted to mention is if there is no super score in GMAT, okay, so even if you scored very high in one and very high in the second, in another section, you can't mix and match and then give a super score, okay? But what you can do is mention it. And you can mention, for example, in the optional essay, again, I'm not saying to do this, this is an option. You can say, I took another GMAT, and in my other GMAT, I scored a 90% percentile in the math section. So I know I only score a 78% now, but so you can mention that. And we've spoken to admission committee members, heads of admissions in some schools, who said they will look at previous GMATs. Now, again, they won't take this kind of a percentage. They'll just look at it. And then they might give you, a thumbs up kind of thing. So definitely, if you have GMATs with different percentiles, you should report those all GMATs as well. Okay, sorry, Danielle, I was talking a lot. I'm going to read another question. I'm an architect. Yay. I think you worked with an architect last year, Danielle. Which school did she get into? Do you remember?
European school.
European
but
school.
also, yes.
It's very familiar to me. I didn't really introduce myself enough. I'm a London Business School graduate. It's quite familiar to me, that school she went to. It starts with an L. Yes. So I think we work with 1 or 2 architects every year. That's definitely not an overrepresented background, and I love it. Okay. An experience of 7 years. Okay. And so this profile, architect, 7 years experience, tier 1 college. Okay. And had been in leadership roles and event committees. So I'm assuming that was kind of in extracurricular activities. And okay, so I started my own practice. Oh, fantastic, of design and construction in my hometown. Amazing. And operating in more than 4 cities. I lead a team of 5. You have a great profile. Have I said this already? I'm targeting universities best for consulting like INSEAD and HEC in Paris. I want to understand what to do to emphasize in my profile to make it stand out. And I haven't given the GMAT yet. Oh, very long question.
Well, I will say from my experience, European schools love architects, as Shimri does and as I do as well. I think you have so much good information here. I would definitely encourage you to focus on all of the engagements, all of the initiatives, the business skills, the business tools, things that you've learned on your own, things that you leveraged from your academic degree, from the theory, any kind of student engagement, any kind of community engagement as well. There seems to be a lot of leadership. There's been a lot of expansion here. I would assume that a lot of it is learning as you go along, like in practice. I think what's going to be important in terms of emphasizing less your profile, but more why it is that you need an MBA. If you've already done all of these things without an MBA, you need to make a very compelling case for why you need an MBA to then fulfill your future goals. And you have to be able to convey and articulate what your future goals are, because some people's goals might be to have their own company in which, their own firm, which you've already done. So I think the key here is really being able to articulate and craft your career strategy in terms of your goals. What is your long-term goal? And then understanding what are those bridges that you need to then fill, the gaps that you need to fill in order to reach those long-term goals. Because at this point, it seems like every time you kind of put a goal, then you're able to fill it on your own. Like you need to make a compelling case to the
So
MBA and to the admissions committee for why you need a degree.
Okay, this is completely key, Danielle, and spot on. So Sandesh, I'll keep it short. First of all, keep my details, take the GMAT, contact me. Okay, very simple. Check out our statistics online for INSEAD. I think it's the school that we have the highest acceptance rate. It's quite unbelievable. So Google Aringo statistics. But I just wanted to add two things. First of all, in your case, you have the full package. What you need is two things. You need a GMAT score, and you need very clear, defined essays, okay? CV, essays, recommendations, but especially the essays. And Danielle touched probably the key, career goals, okay? In your specific case, if you come, hi, I'm an architect, I've opened my own practice, and now I want to move to consulting. I see zero connection there. Why should they take you for consulting and not someone else? Now, I'm not saying don't go for consulting. I didn't say that. I'm not 100, just from this very shallow review of your, 2 sentences profile. I'm not sure that's what I would write in my MBA essays. Okay. I think I would write that I want an MBA. I have 5 people working for me. I want 50 people working for me. Last year's revenue was, 1 million rupees. And, next year I want to get to 10 million, or, post MBA, I want to get to 10 million or 100 million. So how can I get my business bigger? And in order for me to go there, post MBA, I'm planning to do summing. I'm not sure consulting would be what I would advise. Maybe a big real estate company, JJL, company like that, they come and recruit. Maybe some kind of strategy position within maybe one of your clients, so maybe a real estate company, or maybe even in consulting, but something that's connected to what you're doing today. Again, I'm not suggesting what will you really do afterwards. I'm just trying to think, what would I say now to schools? But we definitely need to discuss this, work on the GMAT. Luckily, INSEAD have 2 start dates a year with 4 deadlines each. This kind of every month and a half there's a deadline. Once the GMAT is reached, and you will need, a good GMAT, just talk to me and we can take it from there. Okay, I thought that wasn't the last question, but Denzel, I'm working with you. Sneaked in a last minute question, Daniela. Are we okay?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Last question, okay? And again, check us out on aringo.com. Send me your profile. I love profile reviews. Send me your CV. You have my email. We'll also connect you to Danielle if needed. Okay, last question. Hello, Denzel. I'm a finance services professional with 5 years of experience at a top investment bank. Okay, so far so good. And have constantly been promoted over the course of my career. So if you've been promoted more than once in 5 years, that's already impressive in my mind. That sounds good. My GPA was below average. Who cares? You have 5 years of investment banking experience. Don't worry about that too much. Okay, I'm still studying. I'm giving the answer already. I'm still studying for my GMAT, and my goal is 675 plus. So to be above the average of the top schools. My question is, 1, are my chances of getting into Wharton, Columbia, or Yale, those are very good programs, less if I play in round 2 rather than round 1. So I think question number 1, round 1 versus round 2. Maybe that's the only question. Had the initial go for round 1, but the GMAT is taking longer than expected. Danielle, I love round questions. Should I answer?
So I'll weigh in afterwards.
I love it. Okay. I actually have a formula for this. So round 1 is better. I'm not hiding this. Round 1 is a bit better in everything. Higher chances of acceptance, again, a bit, not by a magnitude. Higher chances for a scholarship, a bit, not by a magnitude. And better project management. So if you apply in round 1 and you don't get in, so you have round 2 to kind of try and apply to other schools. But in round 2, then you have round 3. Round 3, chances are very low. But so how do you know if to apply to round one or round two? I will give you a magic formula. It's called 20 points in the GMAT. That's my magic formula. It's so simple. If you can apply in round one with a GMAT, go for round one. If you can improve your GMAT by 20 points, it's better to wait for round two. Now, take that GMAT analogy to your application. If you can apply with a perfect application in round one, with the maximized GMAT, go for round one. But the same thing, if you haven't worked on the application enough, if it's not, wait, pause. Round two is fine. I think maybe more than half of our candidates work with us in round two. I think it's actually a bigger round. And people just sometimes aim for round one, but realize they just need a bit more time. With the GMAT, sometimes you need to take the English proficiency test. You get stuck on that, on a TOEFL. Sometimes you get stuck on the applications, which just take time. And if you need more time, round two is fine. So quick conclusion, take your time till you are maximized, till you are ready. If you make it in time for round one, great. But if not, don't worry from round two. Danielle, what do you think about my 20 plus points in GMAT
Love that
trick?
formula. I love the formula. I think I would just say, based on my experience, that, and this is the essence of our call today, is that often candidates will put so much attention and resources into the GMAT, and this is very important. That having been said, and Shimri alluded to this now, crafting your essays and the recommendations and the CVs to the best possible way and really putting forth your best profile and distinguishing your candidacy from others is absolutely key. So if you're going to invest all of your resources into a high GMAT, but then neglect really investing in time into crafting a narrative and your profile, then arguably you might be at a disadvantage. Whereas if you spend the requisite time in really developing what your career strategy is and something that makes sense with what you've done in the past, with where you want to go in the future, showing, what kind of leadership experiences you have, what kind of community engagement, who are you outside of the professional? Schools really want this. We haven't talked about this at all. There's also usually a portion about volunteering and definitely additional
Correct.
information, interests, hobbies. Everyone is arguably going to apply with a relative amount of professional experience and average GMAT. Some will be higher, some will be lower. But at the end of the day, schools also want to understand, who are you as a person? What is your decision-making process like? What values drive you? And that's why the essays are so important. So I just don't want, if it's another takeaway from this session, would be to really not to underestimate the value of crafting your narrative for the application and investing the requisite time for that.
Correct. And Danielle, I used to interview for London Business School for 8 years, candidates. And, I used to look for three things. And I used to, yes, academics are important. So, GMAT or GPA, or what did you study? That's important. Professional experience, definitely very important. And the third one was all the rest. Okay. And all the rest is who you are. And there's no right formula here. I'm not saying go and volunteer in the dog shelter. It's very important. I mean, go and volunteer in the dog shelter if you want. But don't go and volunteer just because you heard, oh, people have to volunteer in the dog shelter. Or, oh, I have to have a hobby. I don't have a lot of hobby. I only play chess.com all day. I don't have, a hobby. I have to get a hobby. You don't. It's all about who you are. And schools want to get to know you. And I love that, Danielle. And again, just as important as the GMAT, the GPA is probably less important, but just as important as GMAT and the professional experience is this all the rest. And Danielle kind of mentioned some of that. So Danielle, I think this is kind of the end of the session. I loved it. And sorry, but you're going to be invited as our guest
My pleasure. It's been so much fun. I love sharing our experiences.
Okay, I love that. Do you have any final words? I mean, I think we kind of said all the final words, but any final words? Someone kind of looking at their GMAT score now, just hating that score, but that's what they have.
Okay. So first of all, I'd say be patient and kind with yourself. That's the most important. Other than that, really don't self-select out. The class average, it's just that. It's just in the middle, right? Half the class is below that number, half is above. If you have a plan to mitigate the score and a great story to tell in ways that you understand how to distinguish your candidacy from that of others, you have a real shot. So definitely don't self-select, and wishing you the best of luck.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, this is what we do at Oringo every day. We work with candidates with lower than average GMAT scores, lower than average GPAs. Don't worry, send me your details for a free profile evaluation. I will look at your profile and give you, I think you understood, a very honest, straight to the point, not sugar-coated, sorry, that's just not us, profile evaluation and tell you what the next steps you should take. Okay, that's it. Before we forget, the next session, it's going to be a big one and it's going to be all about M7 MBA experiences. And we're actually bringing a special guest star. Sorry, Danielle, it's not me and it's not you. It's the wonderful Sriram Emani. He is amazing. He's been an Oringo
Fantastic.
consultant forever, nearly like Danielle, probably a bit less, maybe only 13 or 14 years, I can't remember. He's an MIT Sloan grad, and he will be talking to Jennifer, our CEO, about M7 experiences and mainly how to get into M7 programs. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Danielle.
My pleasure. I'm a huge fan of Sriram's. I encourage everyone to sign in and hear all the insights that he has.
We're all huge fans of Sriram. You're right.
True.
Okay, so thanks everyone. We're going to wrap it up and see you in the next coffee chats. Bye. Good
See
luck.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.